So my name is Ollie Couling. I am the tech champion for digital strategy at the Digital Culture Network, and I'm a white man in my 40s wearing a white t-shirt and a flat cap today. So at Digital Culture Network, we speak to many people about their marketing output problems. However, more emphasis is probably needed on the reasons behind why we exist in the world. So today's topic is marketing positioning, and we're going to explore how it can be used as a strategic tool to give your marketing initiatives a better sense of purpose and clarity so that you can get noticed by the people who matter, which is the title of this webinar today. So yeah, I'm really excited to deliver it, and it's quite a new format for us, so thanks for joining. Right, we're going to cover four kind of sections today. Firstly, what is market positioning? Bit of an overview. And please take note of the tracker bar at the bottom, as it will provide an indication of where we are, what stage we are in the presentation as we go through. Next, we're going to talk about how to find and articulate a winning position, which will cover some practical steps and frameworks you can use going forward to create your own positioning statements and guiding policies. In section 3, we are going to hear some case studies from across the sector in which positioning strategies have been executed successfully and understand some of the impact they've had on audiences. And then last section, question 4, to end the session, we're going to have our three brilliant guests join us to share their collective experiences and answer your questions in the Q&A. At this point, it's a good reminder to use the Q&A function at the bottom to save and share your questions as we move through the presentation. Kindly, please do not use the chat to put questions, as they're going to get lost in the feed. All right. So we can't cover everything. If you did wish to dive deeper into any of these topics covered today, please contact us, book a free one-to-one with myself or one of our amazing tech champions. And to continue that conversation in your own time and at your own pace. There will be a booking link in the chat, and you'll get access to that throughout the presentation. Cool. So let's get into the first section. What is market positioning? So in summary, positioning is a long-term advantage that makes you different in a way that your customers or your audiences value, that other people can't easily copy. That's the kind of definition as I found it online. So let's kind of break that down. How you get to a market position can often be broken into 4 parts. So what is the world you are choosing to play in? What is your advantage in this world? Who are the people you're looking to connect with? And how can you serve these people better than others? So knowing the answers to these 4 questions is knowing how you can elevate your position and stand out and connect with your target audiences in a more meaningful and relevant way. We're going to come back to these points again in the second part and look at how to create and structure something that gets to this outcome. But first, I want to just kind of make the point that positioning is not about you. Marketplaces, and this is my representation of a marketplace, they're often noisy, lots of brands gunning for your attention. And as a customer, often you don't know what to choose or even where to start sometimes. So a positioning strategy is knowing or having your best guess of how to be there and why to be there in your customer's time of need. So to do this, you must first be clear about what is important to your customers. What is it that motivates them, that drives them to do things? In this graphic, the axis represents cost on the vertical and quality on the horizontal. If you can position yourself in the corner of this axis, in a way that delivers high satisfaction at a reasonable price, you've gained an advantage over the rest of the crowd. You found a point of difference because when somebody or your audiences want good quality at low cost, you are there. You are the best at solving a specific problem for this specific group of people. So this is a kind of a very basic concept of how positioning works. Understand the world you're operating in and kind of stand tall in a corner of it. Stand tall and proud, I guess. So to demonstrate some of these principles we've just touched upon, I am going to talk about a walk I went on over the summer with my dad. The walk, it was approximately 120 miles long and crosses Devon from the south coast to the north coast. And so, yeah, with that, we needed a really good guidebook. At the bookshop, there were lots of guidebooks for this walk at varying prices, varying kind of levels of detail. The one I chose was not the cheapest, but I was very specific that I wanted one that was small enough to fit in my pocket and that had an OS map. And the one in the picture here was the only option that worked for me. So that stood out, that caught my attention, and I ended up buying it. So a unique position allows you to connect with audiences better because there are not many alternatives. So when people need something specific, you will be the first in line and also top of mind when they are kind of in market or ready to engage with what you offer. So it was early one morning on day 3, I think. We'd had a pretty poor night's sleep. At the top of a hill in a lonely car park on Exmoor, we found this ice cream van. And this ice cream van met several needs all at once. It was in the morning and it was there. It was convenient, so we didn't have to walk miles to get what we needed, and we were knackered because it was at the top of a hill. So a valuable position allows you to connect with your audiences better because you are solving a real problem that matters to people. Oh, sorry. So that was giving the big reveal of my dad. So how much value can you create if you're in a position that people need? And this can be measured in terms of how much someone is willing to pay for what you're offering. Willingness to pay is a great metric for this kind of stuff. The higher someone is willing to pay in that position, the more value you have created. It's a great measure and a proof point for positioning. So my willingness to pay for a coffee that morning was very, very high. And I was more than happy to pay the sum of £4.50 for a very average cup of coffee. But yeah, fair play to the ice cream man. On the very last day, there was a steep descent into Lynmouth, off Exmoor, and to end up on the Bristol Channel. So here's my dad. He was suffering at this point. He's got fairly dodgy knees, and he was pretty unhappy at this stage. I think he wanted to just get to the bottom. So at the bottom of a very steep hill into Lynmouth, we saw this sign. And it was basically this sign was the inspiration for this whole webinar. It was the right thing at the right time at the right place. And my dad was very grateful to see this, and he ended up booking this taxi to get us back to our car. So you have to admire the taxi firm's strategy. They really knew their target audience. So a targeted position allows you to connect with audiences better because audiences know exactly what they're getting. And the last of my slightly odd explanation about or description of positioning is as we finished the trail, we were pretty hungry. We wanted a good square meal. Our options in Lynmouth were either fine dining seafood restaurants or a pretty good looking fish and chip shop. So we wanted something quick, we wanted something filling, and we wanted something outside. We wanted to sit out in the sun. So we chose fish and chips. It's kind of a no-brainer, really. But even though both of our options sold seafood, they are not in competition. And this is because they're operating completely different market categories. So one is fine dining, the other is fast food. So I quite like this example just to kind of as to describe that it's all about really kind of getting clarity about what the world is that you want to position yourself in. You could actually even argue that the fish and chip shop is more kind of closely aligned or more in competition with the ice cream van at the top of the hill. And that's because they both were targeting people based on similar motivations, which was largely, I suppose, convenience at that moment. So winning positions win because they hit that sweet spot between what a customer wants and what you do best, highlighted there in the green section of the Venn diagram. In our creative and cultural sector, defining what we do best and how we add value is made up of a very wide range of nuanced set of emotions, psychologies, and contextual components and circumstances. But whatever your unique and valuable assets are, knowing your worth will almost certainly influence why audiences and customers choose to connect with you and continue to stay with you, hopefully. Yeah, in the diagram, this risky overlap area highlighted in purple, I think it's really important to acknowledge this. A, because it reminds you that you cannot be all things to all people, but it's actually quite helpful when deciding on what things to focus on, particularly if like capacity resources are limited or tight. Maybe this is where you shouldn't be putting your time focused on that ideal kind of part of the diagram. But by understanding where overlaps exist, you can also identify future areas for audience development, for example, or you might even want to turn this into an opportunity, maybe to be more collaborative. For example, to be more collaborative. For example, I've seen organizations do work really well, and they're signposting people to similar organizations that are kind of within their orbit when they're not kind of exactly what someone wants. That's an idea anyway, and I think that kind of act of good service does live in people's memories, and maybe when they're ready for what you offer, they will remember you. So, just a thought. Okay, let's just kind of summarize what makes a strong position. So, your position is clear. People know exactly what they're getting and what makes you different. Your position is valuable. It solves a real problem that matters to people, and your position is unique. So there are not many alternatives. So what you do is hard to copy, and this makes you stand out. To end this first section, I'd like to just invite everyone just to spend a moment, 30 seconds, to think about what 3 words you would choose to describe that sweet spot, that ideal sweet spot between what your customers want and what you do best. I'm going to just be quiet for 30 seconds. So please have a go, have a think, and jot down some ideas. And if you wish to share them, pop them in the chat. That'd be great to see. All right. I can't actually see the chat with the way I've set my screen up, but here are some words that I've prepared. I hope that has stimulated a few new ideas, maybe. When this content is published online in around 7 days' time, we are going to put a word cloud together of all the words shared in the chat. I hope there has been some. I can't see it. I'm really interested to see what words you guys have put down. I think it's going to be interesting to see if any common themes pop up, if any unusual words arise, and maybe some of the words you chose are on the screen here now. So um, at this point, I'd like to just signpost you to my colleague Jack Roscoe. He is our audience data collection specialist. And if you're looking for advice on how to use surveys to find out what people value about you, he's your man. And he'd love to speak to you. I know that. So there's a link in the chat. So please, yeah, book a call, Jack, if this is an area you want to explore more. Right. So let's move to section 2. Okay, this is a little bit more text heavy, and it contains a few more practical steps you can follow. But do not fear, if you miss anything, you can rewatch the content on our Knowledge Hub or on our YouTube channel in about 7 days. It's going to be uploaded again. So the key to articulating your winning position is really to try and keep it simple, I think. Make a promise. So we are the best at solving a problem for this group of people. And then keep that promise. These are the principles we subscribe to, the conditions we create, and the culture we build to create to live up to this promise and to be consistent. I think consistency is a big important word in this. And I suppose this is the strategy stuff really, is how we're able to keep that promise. So for those of you who like an acronym, this is a nice one. It's called the STP Framework, and it stands for segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So segmentation is the world that you choose to operate in, that you want to stand out in. Targeting is deciding who to serve and why they need what you do and what you do best. Positioning, what will make you stand out and how you deliver higher value to these people. So we're now going to look at 5 steps you can follow to create kind of a framework and a guiding policy within this framework here. And we're going to use the Gulbenkian Arts Centre as like an example to kind of run the steps through a machine, I suppose. And we're going to look at how they applied this framework to reposition their cinema offering. And this is something that I worked with them on a couple of years ago, and various of my colleagues have been involved in this project over the past couple of years. The backstory was, when I first spoke to them, that the Gulbenkian needed to respond to increasing pressure from 2 Curzon cinemas that were located in the town of Canterbury, where they are. And this was heavily threatening the viability of the Art Centre's film programme. And this is a picture of their cinema. So step 1 was the first task we looked at was, what was the world we're choosing to play in? For example, are you choosing to play in the fine dining world or the fast food marketplace? So how did Gulbenkian make sense of the world they operate in? Well, historically, the cinema was embedded quite kind of deeply in their broader arts program, and it was quite hard to find. That made kind of marketing quite difficult, and the cinema's identity quite kind of convoluted, and it didn't really stand out to a dedicated audience of cinema goers. So a key decision that was made was to give the cinema its own distinct voice, so that it could differentiate from the existing art program, and it could compete for the attention of cinema goers in Canterbury. So essentially, it chose to compete in the world of cinema experiences in Canterbury, as we called it, and almost go head to head with Curzon, which I thought was really brave and kind of really bold. So how did they find an advantage within that kind of playing field? They needed to identify what capabilities they had that others did not. For example, going back to my dad's walk, could they be that detailed pocket-size guidebook within a whole range of different options? So Gulbenkian, their theory for finding a point of difference was firstly to kind of fill a gap left by an Odeon cinema that had permanently closed and was the former cheap option in Canterbury. So they wanted to fill that gap to be the kind of cheap option. They also chose to shift away from mainstream blockbusters and focus entirely on independent, international, and alternative kind of cult films. And they wanted to capitalize on its close proximity to the University of Kent student campus. So these three things were how they thought they could find that advantage over these two other established uh, brands. So the third step was to decide which audiences they wanted to target and to connect with. And this was probably the hardest bit, really, because being selective and focusing is hard. And, it's natural to want to appeal to everyone all the time. But that's not the job here. We used a useful kind of technique to kind of approach this dilemma. And it's a question that we asked ourselves, or they asked themselves, sorry. And it is, who is the smallest viable audience that if you serve them well, will give you the best chance of success in the future? So that was the kind of problem we looked to overcome using that question as a guide. And through so Gulbenkian thought that their best chance of future success was by targeting the nearby university student population, which also interestingly was a growing market as student intake at the uni was increasing, had been increasing over time. So they saw that as a good opportunity too. Just to break up the text for a moment, here are the locations of the two Curzon cinemas. This is Gulbenkian, right at the top on the edge of town. And this is where the University of Kent student campus is. And I think this really nicely highlights why the student population became the focus of their positioning strategy. And actually the geographical advantage that Gulbenkian had over the two other cinemas. I think we've all been, I'm sure most of us been students and we're pretty lazy as a cohort of people. So part four was the step four was to determine what value they could deliver that no one else could. For example, how could you increase someone's willingness to buy by selling a half decent coffee on top of a hill? Gulbenkian's strategy for standing out and delivering value was they had three kind of core parts to this. One was to create a standalone kind of social media account for the cinema and a dedicated subdomain of the website, so it wasn't wrapped up and hidden behind kind of menus and stuff. And the job or the thought here was just to simply improve the visibility for a cinema-seeking audience. They also added theme nights and fun group activities to the cinema program to encourage kind of young people to turn up and get involved and to actually kind of like re-establish the identity. And through the student union, they offered discounts and incentives to groups and groups of students at the nearby campus. Obviously, it's like a 5-minute walk away or something. So again, quite simple, but yeah, it was effective. And this is a kind of point I've added in just yesterday actually, but remember that your positions might change, people change, trends change, and the weather changes as well. So having access to data to monitor and evaluate your position is like a really key fifth step on this list, I think. If you ever need help getting the data you need, speak to my colleague James Akers. He needs no introduction, but if you'd like one, there's a link in the chat now. Jacqueline's going to pop that in. But yeah, I think this is a definitely one to take off the table and look into a bit more closely about how to kind of find those proof points and those metrics that can validate a new position. Here are all the 5 steps. Take a screenshot if you wish, or you can come back and download the slides. But this is kind of essentially what you need to create a guiding policy that will be able to articulate your new position in the market. once this work is complete, this policy is really kind of useful compass to guide the development and the execution of your future marketing plans and activities. So I would ask yourself, when you're designing your next campaign, who is it for? Who are you competing against, perhaps? What makes you different, and what's the value you're trying to communicate? I think they're really good kind of pillars to reflect on whenever you're approaching a new campaign or a new initiative. And this policy should have the answers to those questions as well if you've spent time doing it. Since launching in September 2024, overall ticket sales at Gulbenkian increased by 13%. Tickets purchased by students and young people increased by 75% and now represent a third of the total ticket sales. And I think this is a fantastic validation of their positioning strategy. The project was also recognised as a winner in the 2025 Digital Culture Network Awards. I think I said that right. And it was a category nominated by the Tech Champions, and I think it highlights the success of its strategic digital transformation and audience development. So yes, there's a podcast with David Yard at the Gulbenkian that's soon to come out, so keep an eye on that. It's the Digital Network podcast, if you haven't heard of it. So here's a nice formula you can use to kind of reduce this process, if you followed it, the steps, into kind of a positioning statement that is clear and simple to communicate. Jacqueline, I think we have a document that you can download that Jacqueline is going to put in the chat and you can use to make your own positioning statement. But let me just read this out as kind of the promise Gulbenkian made. So for students in Canterbury whose need is a fun and affordable night out, the Gulbenkian Cinema provides a diverse programme of films and free taster events because it's a convenient option for a group of friends to go to on a weeknight. And that's kind of essentially what we came up with to really kind of steer the marketing that's happened since in the last 2 years and has had some really good results. So I think it's a nice example of how you can simplify these things into something kind of neat and tidy. Right, just to end this section before we head over to our amazing case studies, a quick recap of what makes a strong position. Your position is clear. People know exactly what they're getting and what makes you different. Your position is valuable. It solves a real problem that matters to people. And your position is unique. There are not many alternatives, so this is what makes you stand out. So we've done quite a bit of theory, and now I'm very excited to move over to hear some kind of practical examples of repositioning in action. For those of you who are here, please show some love, for our guests who are about to join us, and just let us know that you're still here. Great. Okay, so we're going to start. So these are our three guests. I've realised I've not actually, it's been a bit of a surprise, hopefully. We have with us today Zosia Porter from Substract, who is a content strategist and worked with Trinity Laban on their strategy to reposition and realign their online brand identity. We have Joe Merle, sorry, Joe. We have Joe Vaughan, marketing manager at the Museum of English Real Life, and the man behind the Absolute Units podcast, which, if you haven't heard it, is definitely one to download. And we have Debbie Spence, director at MHM, who led the brand strategy for the National Children's Orchestra. And we're going to hear about what they've learned and what they've observed during the planning and implementation of a repositioning project. So the first case study we're going to look at is Trinity Laban. And I'll just give a bit of background and then I'll invite Zosia in to turn cameras on. So Zosia worked closely with Trinity Laban to plan and implement a significant website transformation project, taking like a dated website and a fragmented online identity and bringing it to life, celebrating its multi-art form programming and proposition with the overall aim of growing student numbers. So, Sasha, are you there? Please join us.
Hello, I am here still.
Hey, brilliant. Would you just like to introduce yourself and self-describe for our
Yeah,
listeners?
sure. Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me, Ollie. My name's Zosha, and I am a petite white woman. I'm wearing dungarees and a green top. I've got dark eyes and I've got glasses on to help me see.
Thanks, Sasha. Okay, you ready for some questions? Should we get into
Sure,
this? Okay,
fire
cool.
away.
Well, I've prepared a few for you. So I always start with this kind of looking at the problems before we look at solutions. But what challenges or kind of limitations did Trinity Laban face that led you to kind of exploring this new creative direction and repositioning strategy?
Sure. So, just I guess to give you a little bit of background about Trinity Laban, who knows how it's said? Nobody internally knew either. Um, so, Trinity Laban is a music and dance conservatoire based in London. And just to give a bit of context and history, because it's useful to kind of set the scene,
Yeah.
it's essentially the product of a merger between two arts colleges, so Trinity College of Music and the Laban Centre for Dance back in 2005. And this kind of combining of classical music and contemporary dance education is really quite distinct from other conservatoires. And
Mm.
collaboration between these disciplines is really encouraged. It's a really unique part of the teaching experience there. So Trinity Laban had this really distinct offer, but it wasn't fully expressed in digital terms. Audiences, particularly prospective international students, just weren't getting it. And then obviously added to that is the kind of external context that we're all familiar with around kind of the impact of COVID and Brexit. So something had to change for the university. It was still kind of operating as two separate schools. And so the brand positioning work was all about reflecting the organization as kind of one unit with cross-discipline collaboration at its heart. So that first included a rebrand with a branding agency, and then an update to the website, which is what Substract and the company that I work for was responsible for. So that was really more than just a kind of reskinning exercise. It was a kind of complete rethink about how the organization was communicated, positioned to its audiences. And it was also just about kind of injecting some excitement and dynamism into how the brand was reflected. The old site, which you have up here on the screen, was really flat. It looked like a medical insurance company. It didn't look like the kind of place that has seen the likes of Matthew Bourne and Fela Kuti walk through its corridors. So yeah, it was a kind of a full on kind of repositioning job to do.
Amazing. Um, how did those conversations start internally with the stakeholders? Were they kind of excited about this opportunity, and did they recognize themselves that they needed to kind of go through this process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a really long process. You know, that we came in at the point of the rebrand work having been done, and already that had been probably going for a year or
Okay.
even longer. And then the process of designing and rebuilding the website was another year. So yeah, excitement, but also a kind of the reality check that these things do take a long time, and
Mm.
it's not something that can be done overnight.
Yeah, that's good to know. I know, Zosha, that audience research was played quite a central role in kind of shaping the branding and the design. Um, how did you kind of balance the needs of the various different audiences and stakeholders that were involved in this? Because I know that one of the aims was to kind of showcase this multidisciplinary like offer. So yeah, do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so another challenge that the that Trinity Laban had was that the website wasn't just a destination for university students, prospective students, alumni. They also offer short courses, a program of events, ticketed performances to the wider public. So much like a kind of traditional venue-based arts organisation.
Okay.
A lot of people local to the area come and see shows, they do evening courses. So the website had to work really hard to fulfill the needs of all of these different audience groups. So user research played a really, really important role for us in informing the information architecture of the
Yeah.
new site. So, alongside things like surveys and analytics reviews, we also ran focus groups to get that more like qualitative data on user needs, motivations, pain points in user journeys. And those focus groups really helped to kind of shed light on lots of different things from, how users were going through different journeys on the site to how they thought about language and labeling of things,
Mm.
and help to kind of input on the solutions that we were thinking about. So one of the key findings that I remember from the focus groups was that people who were looking to book short courses were often constrained by the days or evenings that they're kind of regularly free to come and do that course. So we needed to think about presenting that short courses program a little bit like you'd expect a gym classes schedule or timetable to work. So yeah, I guess focus groups, surveys, any kind of audience insight can give you both like qualitative and quantitative data that can really get into like nuggets of insights that then help you to kind of shape the solutions that you put forward.
Amazing. I know we're literally just touching the surface with this, and time is so against us at the moment. But yeah, this is an image of the new like the design that you guys built and came up with. We're gonna have time for one more question, Zosha, I'm afraid. And I know we could talk about this all afternoon, but let's pick one about kind of impact. Let me. So, did you see new audiences engaging with the new output and the new design that you weren't expecting? Is that information available?
Yeah, so I mean, as a website agency, the main mechanism that we use for kind of evaluating impact is looking at analytics and doing user testing. A lot of this project was about streamlining user journeys, communicating in a more effective way. So website analytics can really help you to unpack that. So we saw some really huge improvements in terms of engagement time, clicks from organic search, a huge reduction in terms of use of internal site search, which shows that users are now kind of
Yeah,
independently able to
that's an
navigate
interesting one,
the
isn't it? Yeah,
site.
yeah,
Yeah, so also looking at reductions as well as kind of
yeah. Oh, that's great.
improvements.
Um, Zosh, I'm sorry, we kind of hit time. So
Okay.
there's a link to this case study that we're going to put in the chat that's on the Substract website. So if you want to hear more, just follow the link. Zosh, we're going to come back to you in a bit for the open Q&A. Thank you so much. Um, right, on to MERL, the MERL. Um, so for many years, MERL have built up a really strong online presence. I'm sure some of you are well aware of this, and they have this really great, like, light-hearted social media content. However, there was a recognition that they needed to deepen audience engagement beyond this, like, short form, kind of fun content, which kind of made up the bulk of their digital marketing output. And this led to a strategic shift um, towards creating a podcast that hopefully you've heard, and as a way to deliver historical storytelling with a kind of more wider appeal, but continuing to evolve the, the museum's brand. So, in the form of emoji, please give a warm welcome to Joe Vaughan.
Hi everyone. Very nice to be here.
Hi, Joe.
Hey, how's it
Very good
going?
to have you on today.
Thank you.
Um, and I'm really got my eye on the time at the moment. So should we just delve straight into some questions?
Sure.
Would you?
I'll just very quickly self-describe as well.
Of
So
course, yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, yeah.
yeah, sure. I'm a white man in my early 30s, wearing a turtleneck with dark eyes and messy, uh, quickly combed hair. Um, yeah,
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. So the question I was really interested to ask you today was like, what kind of were the circumstances that led to choosing a podcast as the right format for kind of sharing the museum's work and collections? Because obviously you're quite specific and almost quite niche in what you're doing anyway. So yeah, do you want to just talk a bit about the decisions that got you there?
sure. So I think we're extremely niche. I think nicheness is kind of it's at the heart of a lot of museums, but there's something. The Museum of English Rural Life is almost like a parody museum name if you were trying to come up with the most niche museum imaginable. But I think at the heart of our digital strategy, there's always been this sense of trying to pair engaging or pop culture moments that are already like resonating with people with the collections we have. And I think I mean our most famous tweet is the absolute unit tweet, and that was maybe the zenith of that strategy because it
I've got
took
that.
yeah. So this was done by my predecessor, Adam Kazari. I came in 2019, but basically for a long time, MERL had been looking at. I've done this. I've talked about this so many times, and I know Adam really well, so I'm happy to represent his thinking here as well. But basically, we spent a long time looking at what kind of the big American brands are doing, how people are using social media most effectively, and it was very clear that the content that was performing the highest was humorous, witty, irreverent content for people who were on social media 10 years ago. Think of like Wendy's, for example. And so a big part of MERL's strategy was seeing what's doing well online and then matching our extremely niche connections to those formats. And I think the specificity of our work actually makes that leap and connection even more amusing because you wouldn't expect to find like it feels so obvious now because everyone's so used to seeing the absolute unit tweet, but you wouldn't expect a rural heritage collection to be funny. But that same thinking was at the heart of the podcast format. So as you mentioned, we were
Here's the podcast.
yeah, so we were thinking about how to deepen the long form engagement we do because we'd basically always done engagement 280 characters at a time. Um, and really, we were thinking about where people are. So how do people, general audiences consume long form content? And two, I guess like what prior art do we have of where it works the best? And podcasting felt like a very logical choice given one, I mean, internally we all consume podcasts. Everyone we know consumes podcasts. But two, um, the strength of independent creators in making podcasts, especially history related ones. So we looked at places like The Rest is History or the History Hit Podcast Network. And we thought, they're making podcasts that are getting massive amounts of engagement about history. We have the collections, so why not attempt to bridge the two as we've done with Twitter? Um, yeah.
Brilliant. I love, I mean, I think it's really great that you just kind of looked internally at what you're good at and your strengths and kind of kind of mirrored that and in the outputs. I think that's really just a great bit of advice, really.
Yeah.
Have you noticed, so have you noticed any shifts in the types of audiences engaging with the podcast since it's launched? Is it kind of establishing what the historic audience is, or are you finding it's growing audiences in different places that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, both of those. So the original idea was to deepen the connection we have with the existing digital audience we have, which is like I'm just thinking probably. I mean, one of the big bits of backstory for this, I'm really mindful of time, but it's maybe worth saying is that Twitter was our biggest Twitter slash X slash rest in peace was our biggest platform, and so at the heart of all of our thinking in the last year has been how do we while moving away from Twitter, which we made the executive decision to do, how do we retain engagement with the museum as well as, trying new formats. So we kept the Absolute unit as our kind of brand asset because it's so recognizable and people would recognize it in different places because we really wanted to put something out there and spread it as far as possible that had that familiarity for people. And so it's been really, really successful in engaging people who, may have recognized it from Twitter, but also the audience we built up on Blue Sky, on Instagram, places like that. But we have also seen really significant audience growth and development as well in places and directions that we didn't necessarily anticipate. So the goal really was do something for our, the people that love MERL already. But we're finding so many people are telling us they love the podcast who we don't recognize, new faces online and people coming into the museum saying they're visiting because they love the podcast, which is
That's brilliant to hear.
amazing. Yeah. So yeah, it's been. I mean, we've just released episode 10, but we're getting 1,500 to 2,000 downloads per episode. So yeah, it's been really, really successful, and I feel like we're only really at the beginning of it as well. So yeah.
Again, time is really, really going fast, and I'd love to speak.
Yeah, of course.
But one quick kind of a short answer, if you can, just what advice would you give to other cultural organizations who are looking to launch like a new digital product, sorry,
Yeah, I think
as a way to kind of reach new audiences?
cool. I can condense this into 2 points, I think. The first is do it as high quality as you can. We felt with audio, the most important thing was that the audio was really, really strong. And so we did a pilot season where the audio wasn't that great. And then we invested really heavily in new mics. But I say really heavily, it's museum budget, it's not that heavy. But we invested in decent Rode microphones and stuff like that. So yeah, do it at quality if you're going to do it at all. And the second is just be curious about what can happen because once it starts building momentum, I think it's about kind of shepherding that momentum forward and seeing where you can take it to. So yeah.
Yeah. We've got a link to the Absolute Units podcast in the chat, so go take a listen and kind of hear what's been going on. But Joe, maybe some of these we can kind of take some of these learnings as well and maybe share them backwards share them later on. So
That'd be
Joe,
brilliant.
thanks a lot, and we'll speak to you again in a sec.
Thanks.
Okay, for our final case study, we have Debbie Spence, director at MHM, who's going to be sharing insight on how National Children's Orchestra went from a well-loved and under-recognized organisation to having a bold, child-centered brand that puts well-being and creativity at the front and centre. So, Debbie, I know we're thanks so much for your patience, but please come in and self-describe if you can.
Thanks, Ollie. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Debbie Spence. I'm one of the directors at MHM. I'm a woman in my mid-40s with short dark hair, wearing a dark short-sleeved shirt and glasses, and joining you today from my home office in the UK with a blurred background. I'm really glad we're talking about brand strategy and positioning. Thanks for having me, Ollie, and the rest of the team. It's such an important tool for arts and cultural organisations, and one that I feel doesn't get enough spotlight. So it's great to talk about this today. And it's so important for any organisation that wants to understand and connect with their audiences. So thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. No, I mean, I saw your talk at AMA this year in Glasgow, and in Edinburgh, sorry. And no, I went straight up to you afterwards and asked if you could come on. So no, it's brilliant to have you here today. Can we just maybe start by talking a kind of big picture? What was the moment that National Children's Orchestra kind of realised that their previous positioning wasn't really working?
Yeah, great. I'm really glad you did connect after the session. It was such a good conversation there. But and I loved being part of this repositioning. It was such a privilege to work with an organisation like NCO and experience the brilliant the work that they do. And when it came to when they noticed they needed to reposition, it's similar to other organisations. It's often when the outside in perception doesn't match the inside out. And when we started this work with National Children's Orchestras, they were really admired for bringing together the UK's most talented young musicians. but that reputation was also a constraint for them. So they were really well known for excellence, but not fully recognized for the broader impact that they have on children's lives. And also, there's another indicator for them that they were reticent to send people to their website. So they saw that the story that their brand was telling was disconnected from the real work that they were doing. So
Mm.
inside, we knew it was about the joy and the well-being and the community and inclusive for children across the country, but that wasn't the impression that the outside world was getting from the brand and from the brand positioning. So it was really that the brand wasn't representing all that NCO stood for and was too narrow. So it's really those couple of indicators.
That's really great advice. So kind of like connecting the perceptions internally and externally and making them kind of aligned is kind of part of the what you did. I think that's a really brilliant piece of advice. Um, I've taken this diagram here because this was pinched from your from your slides in AMA, but we at DCM we try and provide like practical kind of advice and tools you can use. So I'd love to hear about some of the processes and tools you used to get to the outcome that you have. Um, yeah, what was maybe the single most useful tool or framework you used to kind of get that clarity that you achieved?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. We pinched this as well from the UK Design Council. This is their double diamond tool that we use an awful lot. So it means that we go in without the assumption of a solution. So it's about
Okay.
going wide and then coming in, and then going wide again and exploring lots of different options. We could spend a whole webinar just on this, to be honest.
Okay.
This is the approach that we took with NCO because we have the belief at MHM that brands belong to those that they connect with. So it was really important for us to co-create this brand. It wasn't about us sitting with the board or in our laptops, saying what could the brand positioning be. We really needed to start by discovering what the brand meant to people
Yeah.
and children. Now, people say never work with children and animals, but the children at National Children's Orchestras was a real joy. And they working with children as well. They have a knack for cutting through any marketing or branding fluff
Yeah.
and telling us what it meant to them. So it was so important to us that we understood the value and the benefits from the children themselves and their families and their sort of educators and from the staff. So we started with Discover. So what does this brand mean to people? What's the real experience? What do they get emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, and discovering that together first. So using this tool and this framework really for our approach really helped us to do that. Again, I said we could talk about this for another hour, so I know we're tight for time.
No,
But
yeah, I mean, I think we're probably overrun, but it's okay. But you talk about co-creation. What did listening to children and parents kind of change about the brand ultimately?
yeah, as I said, starting from the outside in, that what does the brand mean to people? What could it mean? And understanding their context and the role that the brand can play in their lives is so important when it comes to brand positioning and co-creating with the children, with parents, with staff, with freelancers and activity teams. They reminded us it's not just about the music and it's not
Mm.
just about musical skills and talent. It was really about understanding the connection that they had with friends, the fun, and feeling part of something. And talking to the children themselves really gave us permission to make joy and playfulness and well-being central to the brand positioning. So we wouldn't have got there without talking to the children.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that imagery of kind of kids cutting through and coming up with like really amazing kind of new ideas.
Yeah,
Um,
there's no hiding place for children.
yeah. Um, so we've probably got like a minute left, Debbie. I'm so sorry. But in terms of impact, I know that I'm aware this project was only quite recently launched, so maybe you haven't got all the data yet. But um, did kind of what surprised you most? What has surprised you the most so far about the new positioning?
Um, yeah, it did feel risky at first, and for NCO and the team and the board stepping away from tradition felt really really risky. But what has surprised us pleasantly is that how well the new positioning has landed, being picked up by everyone immediately. So we loved hearing that. all of the staff and the teams now are 100% confident in telling the brand story of NCO and really understand what NCO stands for. So that was a great, pleasant surprise, but also how quickly the children themselves have picked it up and owned it.
Yeah.
And the Yard Creative brought the brand strategy to life, and I think they've done brilliantly. Really brought out the brand personality, and apparently all the children and kids are requesting merch and are looking for ways that they can display the brand and the branding and the brand messaging as well,
Wow.
which again was a really pleasant surprise.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that idea of how it is has quickly changed confidence as well.
Massive.
That's a great comment. Um, we're going to move over to our Q&A, and I'm going to leave, Debbie, I'll come to you with a question when we move over, and it's just a general question. I need to just check we've got enough time to go on, but just think about this. There's an article Debbie's written on brand building that's in the chat now, so go take a look at that. It's really brilliant. But Debbie, what advice would you give to organisations looking to reposition themselves but aren't sure where to start? That's going to be our first question for the Q&A.
Right.
So, guys, can I just check, Rose? Are we okay to just go over by 5 minutes?
You can go over by a couple of minutes, Ollie.
Okay, well,
5 minutes, that's it.
5 minutes. Thank you. Debbie, so yeah, how about do you guys just want to come in? I know we've got very little time, but does everyone want to come back in? And thank you so much to all of you guys for joining us today. Debbie, Zosha, Joe, are you able to come back? Are you still there?
Yep.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Oh, you're here. Sorry, guys, I couldn't see you. Right, let's just try and keep it tight then. For organizations who are on a tight budget, and I know that probably applies to many people, what is like one kind of step that organizations and individuals can take to kind of start improving their positioning? I'm just going to ask the same question to everyone.
I'd say, yeah, it's really difficult out there in terms of budgets. But one piece of advice we'd give is talk to your audiences, connect with your audiences. It doesn't have to be a huge piece of research or a massive population survey, but a few proper conversations. So insight doesn't have to be really expensive, but it has to be real. So we definitely advise that positioning built with audiences is the place to start. So really understand how you're currently seen, what's important in the lives of the people you're trying to connect with, and then consider your brand positioning in that context.
Brilliant. Thanks, Debbie. Joe and Zosha, do you have anything to add to that same question?
I was going to say the same thing, so nothing more to add really, apart from just thinking about like your relationships internally and bringing people along that journey with you from the top to the bottom to the sides of the organization. It's really important to get everybody on board to what you're doing.
Do you have any like really quick advice about how to kind of go about that?
Talk to people, talk to your audiences, talk to your colleagues.
Open dialogue and like kind of transparency. Okay, great. And Joe, this is one for you. Let's end on this. I just seen this one come in on the chat. So where do you see the biggest opportunities for organizations in our sector when it comes to repositioning going forward, looking into the future and the horizon scanning?
I think it totally depends on the audience you're going after. So I'd recommend, I think that the exercises you shared earlier in this talk are brilliant. So I recommend everyone do that. I mean, I think for us, if we had to pick a direction, it probably would be like short form video, which I know a lot of places are doing already. But when we thought about pivoting to that when we did the podcast, we kind of felt actually we didn't have the right expertise internally. So that's why we went down the podcast route, because we had the budget for the kit and we had some audio skill already. But yeah, I mean, I think think about where your audience is, think about what they're doing. Yeah, talk to your audience, I think, and find out from them what they want.
And in terms of like kind of social listening tools, you obviously found that humor was working for you, and how have you got a quick kind of takeaway on that for our participants?
Yeah, I mean, I think we really like at the heart of our social media strategy was we're a tiny museum with a tiny team, and it's like how do you make the biggest amount of impact. And for us, it was jokes and humor, and really looking at like what kind of content performs the best online. So I think possibly the biggest tip I would give, and I think it's something that's been at the heart of all of MERL's success, is to not just look at what museums and art organizations are doing, because I think the risk of that is it becomes very inward looking. So look at what's actually working well on those platforms and do that as much as looking at what the sector's doing.
That's a brilliant way to end the session, guys. A million thank yous. And we've got loads of questions actually, and there's just no time to answer them all. I'm going to try and find a way to follow up with these questions and loop in our three brilliant guests. So yeah, thanks again to Zosha, Joe, and Debbie. Thanks for listening and coming to our webinar. I hope you found it useful today. The slides, including the links and the contact details, will be available on our Knowledge Hub. Here's the website to go look at. We've got loads more webinars. Book a one-to-one. It's totally free and unlimited. And I just got to plug one timely webinar that's coming up from my colleague Jack, who I mentioned earlier, audience data collection specialist. Obviously, he's kind of his skill set is very useful in this context. So it leads on nicely from this session, and he talks about how to design surveys to better understand your audience's motivation, wants and needs, and to find out what's valuable to them. So yeah, a perfect follow-up really. So there's a QR code if you want to get straight to that website Eventbrite page and book onto that webinar. That's it. Connect on the socials. We'd love to hear from you, and thank you all, folks. Thanks everyone. Bye.